them in. We'll be answering them as we go through that. And we're trying to save some time also at the end so we could take some questions. So, so that's that for as far as housekeeping. So as an introduction, as I said, this is first of two sessions that cover AI fundamentals and practical applications used by our ESC affiliates. In the course of both their internal and client engagements, we have two case studies that we're going to be going through. Just a quick fun fact. There was a study that was done by a company called Virtuous on nonprofit AI adoption. They published a report. So of the 346 companies or nonprofits that they surveyed, 92% have already started the path to AI. And they're using that mostly for what's referred to as generative AI, which is creating content for minor efficiency gains. So, and then only 7% of it have achieved significant transformation, which when you think about it is a huge amount that's deficient because there's so many things you can do with this, but there's so many gotchas that you have to worry about with that as well, right? So I have a question before we move on, right? So giving me a thumbs up. Everyone know, well, let me ask this question first. Does everyone know where the reactions are in Zoom? How to do that? So if you go down to the bottom into the Zoom screen, it'll give you the opportunity to do reactions, right? So we're going to do a quick check. So give me a thumbs up if you're confident. You know exactly where your data goes and how AI uses it after you hit send, and a thumbs down if you still feel it's a black box or a bit of a mystery. So you have no idea what happens once you hit send. Like, I got a lot of surprise faces there. So that's real important when we do this because, and the reason I bring it up is if we do not use like the client's AI license, it will send it into what's referred to as the ether and become part of the model. So there's governance and confidentiality pieces that we need to worry about as we go forward, helping our clients get their stuff done. So today that's really my 2 cents on the introduction, right? So we're going to be looking today as from an agenda perspective as trends in AI, which Carl Garrison is going to lead for us, practical use and prompting. And a bunch of examples around that, which is David Blanco. And then I'll be going over a case study for this stakeholder survey that we did for our internal stuff here at ESC Florida for the planning for the new year. And there was an actual client engagement that Amelia Waters led that used AI to do the analysis. And then at the end, we're going to try to have at least 10 minutes to wrap up and take any questions. Okay. So that having been said, Carl, you're up with the trends in AI.
Good afternoon, ESCers. I'm going to go through navigating this new era that I will be talking about in AI and how it affects us as ESCers, our internal processes and things, and also our nonprofits. Next slide. So the world kind of changed in 25, toward the end of 25 as we came into 26 as far as AI is concerned. And it was a solid change, no big announcements or anything. So to give a little history, if we start over on the right, and from 2019 to 21, there was AI experimental, mostly by the companies and their staff and stuff that produced it, the Googles of the world, the Open AIs, the Metas of the world. And so they were trying to build up their language models and try to understand how they worked, and all that sort of stuff was going on in that time frame. And then In 22 and 23, it went to the world. It went mainstream with the announcement of ChatGPT by OpenAI. All the other players like Google had, it was called Bart for a while, had to jump in. They've been doing a lot of research for years, and now all of a sudden they better show that they've got something. So everybody got to jump in, and so that's what happened. People started using it the fastest rate of adoption of any other technology in the last 50 years, and have been a lot of really great technology in the last 50 years. But people use it a lot for writing, summarizing things, and a term called prompt engineering became popular with no real definition. And then as we moved into 24, we came to the early adopters started really getting some productivity out of it. They were able to automate some tasks and then utilize that over and over again to get some productivity. As we went into 25, this is where the shift started. And it started by not being just impressive and going, wow, look at just what prompt did, but started being useful and things that they could run on a recurring basis. And workflows started getting to be semi-automated. So the key takeaways, we went from nice to have to starting to be in the core workflow. Next slide. So how did this shift without us really knowing it? What happened? It was like there's no big formal announcement. And what did it look like in the nonprofit sector? Well, on grants, what used to take several weeks could be done in a few days. Donor reports, we could get more detail in, we could get it done faster. Personalized outreach that was just not scalable unless you were a United Way or something were now possible. So what really happened? Well, the funders, the partners, the clients did not start asking, are you using AI? No, they started asking, what's taking so long? I get the stuff from partner A and they get it back in a day or a couple of days, and you guys are still taking 2 weeks. What's going on? So that's what led to that silent, but it's got, oh man, I got to catch up. Next slide. So as we go into 26, it goes from AI cures to AI first. So there's kind of two mindsets still going on as you, I'm still continuing in the 2025 cures where you're asking a question, simple task, you're still doing primarily manual workflows and automating a few tasks in the middle of it. So the activity is really about task completion and that focus. As we move into AI first, we need to think about this like this. All of a sudden, we've hired this AI first intern. See him in the picture there? He's incredibly fast, incredibly smart. He always shows up. He's always available. He has such a range of knowledge. He can wear multiple roles, not only on a different day, but at the same time. So we've hired this incredible AI first intern. So what do we want him to do? We start giving him ownership of certain functions and tasks. That's the kind of things that's going on in the AI first end. So we start automating workflows where they can run 24/7. So now the impact is about outcome achieved. In other words, we set a goal, we set a plan, we check and get that output. Not just a task, maybe a whole series of tasks. Next slide, please. So get a little understanding of this. First take a look at, prompts our main way of interfacing with this AI. So what should one have in it to be a powerful one that AI first can make use of? And I can tell you, communicate with AI, it is a skill set. And it's not one that just intuitive that comes to you. A good, powerful prompt is going to have these 4 components. We're going to have the role, the persona, and that may seem kind of silly, but believe me, it makes a big impact. So this is the role that our AI first intern is going to play. You're our senior grant writer. That's going to be who you are. And next, we got to give it some context, basically the why. Here's why we're asking you to do this. And then component 3 is some rules. What's the constraints? In this case, we told it, okay, we want you to use these tones. It could have been styles or things like that. And then the fourth one is what the specific task is and what's it look like when it's finished. So those four things are the main components of powerful prompts that will be used to help us direct our AI first intern. Next slide. Here's what's been happening. We'd have it to do a simple task. We'd write a social media post that's about upcoming gala. Okay, that's generic, and we might not get what we want because what we need for LinkedIn may be different than what we need for Instagram and what we need for a Facebook company page, organization page. We didn't tell them that. Not very specific. So it could come out a very useful thing. It may not. One thing about moving into this era that you have to start learning is communicating back to the prompt, if you will. If it didn't come out right, you tell it that. Hey, that's not what I had in mind. This is what I had in mind. And by the way, it needs to use our branded colors. And this is what they are. And so you see what you're doing? That communication is filling in those four components. It's be a lot faster and a lot quicker to create a prompt that looks like what's on the right here. It's the future. Okay, we're telling the AI first guy or gal, let's just call him intern. You could be the communication director. And here's the goal. Here's what we're trying to do. Here's the context. Here's going to be your responsibilities. And here's some rules you want. So now they do multi-channel things and we get much more leverage. This gets us to the leverage of where we can actually start increasing the capacity for not only our own organizations, but for our nonprofits that we're assisting. Next slide. Here's another example, still using the 23, 24 kinds of style prompts. A thank you note to a donor and an amount, and it will probably produce you a pretty good one. Now, things are getting so embedded with the AI of the new future that if you're using Gmail, all of a sudden it will pop up or Grammarly and say, hey, can I improve that paragraph for you before you hit that enter button? And it will make you a much prettier thing where it goes out, even though you forgot to run it through AI. So that's starting to happen. It's getting embedded in all these products. And some in the whole Microsoft world, it's called Copilot. And other products, it's called Cowork or Copilot, those kind of things. But really, the system design approach that we're going to move to in 26 style prompts is like the one on the right. So again, telling that the AI intern, here's what your role is going to be. Here's what my role is going to be. Here's the why. Here's the priorities. And here's what your responsibility. So now you're giving them a larger goal and you're monitoring to see if he carried out the whole plan. So I'm just giving you a few to give an example. Next slide. Now here's a couple of the smart prompts that could be useful for a lot of nonprofits. And by the way, you are going to get all these slides and all at the end. So one, we want to transform a bunch of raw field data and stuff we got into a polished donor impact report. So we would tell our AI first intern, you're going to be a research analyst. And here's what the context of it and why. And then you're telling it, here's how I want to have all these sections, and here's the rules, and this is what I want. And so you're telling a lot more stuff. Don't worry about the markdown. We can talk about that offline, but it's just a way of telling it what you want it to look like. The second one, I want to create. We got a lot of word people. We got nobody that really has good visual concept skills. So AI first intern, I want you to be a futuristic, not just a skilled visual designer, but a futuristic one. And this is some constraints around it. To be hopeful, here's our brand colors. Here's what we're going to do. Here's the composition. Here's the mood. Here's what I want out of this. So you see how you're given AI first world era is about giving that AI first intern instructions of what to do, where they know why, they know the context, and they know what to do. And it could be multiple tasks. Next slide, please. the key thing that we really want to move to in 26 forward is using prompts, these individual prompts, even though the structured ones we just talked about is building blocks, because we want to go from doing a task to building a system, not just answering questions. And so these building blocks, one prompt creates an output that's used by the next prompt as input, and that prompt produces output that's used, and so forth. They're all tied together to automate a workflow. And so there are products, because we may want it to interface with like a CRM, like a Salesforce or something in the middle of all this. So there are new products called, a couple of them called Zapier and Prompt Hub that don't require any coding. So don't get freaked out with all this, but it's going to be a lot of coding done. But the big shift is, and this is what I'm trying to get across in this year, instead of doing the work, it's designing how the work gets done. So be able to give that AI first intern good instructions of how to do the work. Next slide. So to get an idea how this fits in, and by the way, these layers, these 5 layers, you'll see this a little different layers if it's a techie oriented, but this is all about the impact layers. So we're kind of stuck at layer 1. We're talking to these models and now they're getting better and better. Now you could say, well, I want this fast. I want this live where I can communicate back and forth with you, or I want you to do some deep thinking or deep research. So those are getting better and they can answer more complex questions. But we want to move up. The L2 to L4 layers is where we start really making an impact for our own organizations and helping our nonprofits that are our clients make a big impact and leverage their whole mission where they can increase the capacity of what they're doing. So we start L2, you see we get agents, then we start connecting them together to get some automation done. And the latter one is when we go outside the AI prompt world and we start connecting other tools to the prompts. So that 2 to 4 is where we need to be going forward in 26 forward. Next slide. Here's an example of the running by itself. That's another key thing. These prompts and all, and the systems we put together, workflows, they don't have to be supervised, or they can be kind of self-supervised and only alert you if something doesn't come out right or it's urgent. So here's an example of an overnight donor report. So some trigger kicks it off every Friday at 2:00. And then we go to fetching data, then we go to analyzing data, formats. It is moving this data along to get this final predefined report. So that's available and it's actually mailed out to all the stakeholders by 7 a.m. And it does this every week. So the key insight here, we're going from manually prepping reports, which takes up too much time, and we've got a lot more data and a lot less time. So we want to spend our time not working on that task, but working on a system that will do it better. Next slide. Here's a couple examples of a great monitor is the use case, telling AI first what to do. So second one over here is a volunteer coordinator where the AI first basically handles all the tasks of coordination. Next slide. So we're shifting from doing the work to designing the work. So this is not replacing the passion, the mission-driven people. We're trying to amplify it. We're trying to help them expand their organization, give them more capacity. And we don't really need coders and prompt people to do this. We need people that understand the business and how to design the workflows and where is a strategic place to use AI. Next slide, please. So what we're trying to do is make things scalable.
I don't think it's that long.
Make things scalable and make things where we're multiplied. So it doesn't replace our purpose. It multiplies the impact. It gives us more capacity in our nonprofits working. Next slide, please. So it's not, the same as knowing is not the same as doing. Going to these seminars like we're having today is a good thing, but one thing we've learned on that, you can't do it in isolation. There's things called meetup.coms that you can go to anywhere in the United States. In Houston, for instance, there's 5 AI meetups. About half of them are techie and half of them are how you use an AI in business. This lack of a structure, collecting all these prompts that we think are going to be clever, is not really building a system. What you really need to do is get some hands on building a system. Build one for your own organization. Then work with one nonprofit client and work with them to help build one. So then you start developing confidence and all to how to advise, because you're going to get asked, how do I use AI effectively in my organization? Next slide, please. So the future is all about putting AI first intern. He's always ready, smarter than anybody in the room, fast, and is always there 24/7. So the journey from going from AI curious to AI first, I believe, is the single greatest opportunity that we have, particularly in the nonprofit world, to scale resources, to automate operations. Ultimately, it amplifies our mission and gives us more capacity to do work. So today is where your journey begins. And we're going to be talking about that with the next couple of speakers. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Carl. So, is everybody excited now? We're all going to go out and party and dance in Times Square with this. But I mean, it really is a transformational shift in the way we do stuff, either personally for work or for clients. If those of us that have a technology background like myself, remember there's some, Moore's law. Moore was the head of Intel. Every 18 months, they would change the speed of a processor. And every 24 months, the size of a hard drive would increase. So, you have the same kind of shift here, and it's all transformational. It's a question of whether or not you have the governance in place, because as I mentioned earlier, if we're not careful, the data, the confidential data, that can be like a donor list that they're using to automate something like a mailing, could end up unintentionally somewhere else. Like in Florida's chapter uses Gemini. The agreement we have with them, and Joel, correct me if I'm wrong, it's set up so that our data stays with us. It doesn't go outside. Other things like Claude and Copilot may do that. I just wanted to add that in there. So that having been said, next up, we have David Blanco, who's going to go over prompting best practices and kind of give you a little bit more in-depth taste, and we'll probably give you a couple of examples of, prompts that work versus prompts that work better, if you will.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I've already learned something from this session, and that is that I will never be an instructor on the appropriate use of Zoom, because I don't have the picture on my screen. So I'm going to improvise as best I can in that format. And I'm really counting on my new friend, Michael, to help me along with that. So,
Sure.
Michael, could you bring up the first page?
Yes, your first slide is up.
Oh, it is? Okay. I'll take your word for it. Okay, so I'm curious, just show of hands, how many of you are just starting to explore AI versus using it regularly? You can use the screen, the thing at the bottom of the screen, the reaction, if you would. It looks like we have quite a few. So my presentation today is geared to particularly to those who are getting started. I hope people who are further along will also benefit. So wherever you are on the spectrum, you're in the right place. So my first piece of advice to all of you newbies is, before anything else, don't be afraid of AI. Start slow. The easiest on-ramp is asking for input on communications that are complex. Those may be ones that require tact and diplomacy. They're just hard emails, a sensitive board memo, a language you want to get exactly right. And I can't tell you how many times AI has saved me from sending out something I might have regretted later. Um, so let's see.
You want the next slide?
Not quite yet.
Okay.
So just try it. And everything I've learned did not come from a manual. It came from months of experimenting, small tries, most of them forgettable, a few that actually stuck. So that's the real on-ramp. Start small, keep trying, and more sophisticated uses follow on their own. So I'm generally glad to share what I've learned. AI has become a valued thought partner for me. It makes me more efficient and it sharpens my work. And I get, maybe this is the nerdy side of me. I kind of enjoy it. So next slide, please. That would be what this session covers, I hope. Is that where we are now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to talk about the practical side of using AI, not the theory, not where the technology is headed, but what actually changes the quality of what you get out of it. Most of you run organizations, you know the difference between a vague ask and a well-framed one. That's really what prompting is all about. So in the course of today, I'm going to walk through 10 techniques, um, uh, 4 of them in detail and 6 of them in less detail because we don't have enough time. You should already have the full handout that includes all of that, plus some examples we'll talk about. And then we'll close with a note on confidentiality. I think that's come up a number of times already, but try to give you a little more definition on what that looks like and how you might want to approach it. I'm in the middle of working on confidentiality on a strategic planning process, and it's not simple. We're designing protocols for the consultants involved, and part of any new part of your business is designing the business processes that go along with it, and that's a key part of confidentiality. So one housekeeping note: if you have questions, please drop them into the Zoom chat as they come up, and I'll pause briefly at the after the 2 examples. If you don't have the handout, it should have been, I think there was a link to that in the email that went out announcing this session. I think there was a bolded link there. So before we get into specific techniques, let's just ground this in plain terms. 3 things AI is actually good for, regardless of your experience level. One is it drafts. Anything you'd normally stare at a blank page for instance, a letter, a board memo, a hard email, you can get a first version in seconds, not a finished product. A lot of times when I'm writing something, I just say, here's a couple key thoughts that I want to have in this document. Give me something to start with. And then I'll have a dialogue back and forth with AI to refine and polish the result. Second, it summarizes. It can take a long document, a stack of notes, a pile of emails, and turn into something you can actually use fast. I mean, one of the things I do is there's lots of nonfiction books. I just put it into AI and say, tell me what the 6 takeaways from this book are, and it streamlines the process there. 3, it thinks with you. You can talk through a decision before you take it to people, and a good prompt will push back rather than just agree with you. But you have to tell your AI agent that you want that pushback. So here's how you start. Open a chat, describe what you're trying to do in plain English, and treat the first answer as a draft, not an answer, something to be refined in consultation with AI. So next slide, please, which should be for technique.
Or techniques.
Okay.
It's up.
All right. All right. So the first one is, and I found this very useful. Ask AI to interview you first. Before you ask AI something complex, tell it to ask you questions first. Before you respond, ask me the questions that would help you give me the most useful answer. That surfaces context. A lot of times you may just be very focused on something. AI will say, okay, well, there's a broader context. Tell me how you're thinking about this. Tell me how you're thinking about that. Within the group you might be working with, which one does this need to be targeted to? And it really helps to get things focused from the get-go. Two is invite pushback, not polish. Anyone who's worked with AI knows that it loves to tell you how smart you are, and that's not necessarily what you're looking for. You're not looking for the partner who's a sycophant. You're looking for the partner that's going to challenge you. So if you say, "What do you think?" that keeps AI in editor mode. Better alternatives would be, "What's the strongest critique of this? Where could this land poorly in the room? And notably, how would you improve this?" That has saved me hours, that prompt. The third technique is tell AI what a good answer is not. Sometimes it's faster to say what to avoid than what you want. Don't give me a bulleted list. Don't soften this. I need it direct. And in some cases, maybe given the audience we're talking about here, maybe here's a sensitive topic to avoid in terms of responding to what I've written. And then four, I think Carl mentioned this, is assign a role before you ask. This changes the output more than almost anything you can do. Act as a skeptical board member. You'll see this in the second example coming up. Or maybe ask it to play multiple roles. Or if you're in a highly technical area, say, pretend you're Albert Einstein and you're trying to refine the atomic bomb, you're going to get a different result there than if you are coming at it in a more general way. Next slide, please. Example one. All right, so I tried to take two examples of processes or things you probably likely do in the course of being a consultant. One is analyzing a single stakeholder interview. The other one is testing a proposal, recommendation, whatever that you may have developed. And I just thought it would be helpful for you to see how these procedures could help to make those processes better. So under analyzing a single stakeholder interview, the weak version would be, here are my interview notes. What are the main themes? On the face of it, that sounds reasonable, but themes invites your AI friend to smooth everything into consensus, to tell you how great you are, which is exactly wrong when you're trying to basically pull out from an interview the things, the insights, the things that are different, and the things that may differentiate it from lots of other interviews you're doing. The stronger prompt does a couple things differently. It names exactly who it is, and we're finding in the strategic planning process, if we tell it which stakeholder group the interviewee is coming from, AI will look at it differently. So that could be a program director at a mid-sized nonprofit, for instance. And it explicitly says what not to do. Don't aggregate. So when you're doing this analysis of transcripts in AI, don't jumble them all in at first. Do them one by one, piece by piece. There will be a time later when you can aggregate and say, okay, what are the overriding themes? But it won't be as granular if you go there right away. So you want to initially don't aggregate, don't compare to other interviews, preserve nuance, and don't round the edges. I mean, you are looking for that sort of outlier comment that might give you some wisdom or perspective that wouldn't appear otherwise. Then this prompt asks three sharp questions. What does this person most want? Leadership to understand. What are they softening or holding back? That's an interesting one. When I mean, this AI engine I'm using is coming up with stuff that says, "Wow, that person is avoiding something. Maybe that's something to drill down on more." And then where might this contradict what other people are saying? That instruction, preserving nuance, don't round the edges, is doing a lot of work. Again, AI's default instinct is to try to smooth everything, polish it, make it seem like one smooth, non-chaotic situation. And a lot of times that's not necessarily what you're dealing with. So anyway, so having gone through that one prompt situation, let's just pause here for a minute. Is there anyone who's is there anyone who's used AI for this kind of process? And are there any short reflections on what you may have experienced in that regard?
David, this is Jack Doerr. I've used AI really more to become familiar with the product than I have on the job, so to speak. But I have found it's extraordinarily useful, but also really requires you to challenge the information that you're getting from it.
Yes, yes,
So
absolutely.
that's my biggest takeaway, I think. And if you do that, then it'll start to drill down more into its databases and really give you information that's more relevant.
Yes. So just to expand upon your point, I would say don't be afraid to disagree. And also don't be afraid to say you need to do more in terms of expanding the scope or pursuing something it may not have gotten into. So thank you for that. Any other thoughts, reflections? Okay.
Yeah, David,
David,
I'm sorry. Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry.
go ahead.
It's important to point out that AI will hallucinate, right? Because it's
Yeah.
giving you what it thinks the next best answer is. It's based on a mathematical percentage model. It's not based on necessarily 100% fact, right? I mean, David, you've seen that, right, in the
Yeah.
work that you've done.
Yes, well, actually, that gets to an advanced technique, which I'll just touch on briefly. And I've spent a lot of time training my AI and saying, I don't want to hear something from you that's speculative. I want backup for all this. And you can do a lot of training. I'm most familiar with Claude, but you can do a lot of training of your AI model. Say, here's what I'm looking for. Here's the tone of voice I want you to use. Here's something you can ask AI to ask you about you and have it extract information and then load it into its memory so that reflects the quality and substance of future exchanges.
David, it's Linda. There was a question about what platform to even start with. Can you just step back for a second and talk about, I mean, I just listed a few in the chat just to orient, but like, how did you know which one to start with? And do you jump between them? And can you speak
Okay,
to that?
that's a great question. I started with ChatGPT and migrated to Claude. Some of that was I just felt like there were some ethical issues with ChatGPT with some of that Pentagon stuff and all. But also my experience with Claude is that a lot of times when I put a prompt in, it may come back and say, if I don't give it enough detail or if I don't invite it to ask questions, it will ask questions anyway, and it will say, if you clarify this for me, it will help me to respond to what you're looking for. Now, I know that there are other AI engines out there that I don't have experience with, but I think Claude has emerged as the leading AI engine in terms of how many people are using it, and I have good experience with it. But to the point about using different ones, there are times when I take something that comes out of Claude and take it back to ChatGPT and vet it that way and say, what do you think of this? Because I found that in some situations, Claude will go down one analytical direction that's valid, but chat will go in another one. And if I get the best thinking from both of them, particularly on a complex topic, then the process is better.
And do you have any experience with the cost of these? I mean, there's a lot that you can do with the free versions without having to pay a dime, but do you
I'm paying
subscribe to them?
I'm paying $20 a month, I think it is, for Claude.
Hmm.
One other practical tip I'll make, particularly, I sort of got burned on this last week. When you start loading things into, for instance, a prompt or a project, AI can get kind of overwhelmed. So I believe what I learned was that Word documents are more efficient than PDFs in terms of how much AI capacity is burned. So that your mileage may vary, but I think that is a lesson I learned last week.
It's not necessarily that it changes. The cost is all in tokens. How many tokens you get for free, and how many
Well,
tokens you
yeah, but I think the
and the
PDFs.
tokens are both include the input tokens as well as the output tokens.
Okay, well, my understanding is the PDFs require more tokens than the Word documents, but uh, I'm still learning about that. So please don't try test that for yourself. Okay, well, some interesting points there. In the interest of time, let me keep moving, and if there are more questions, please put them in the chat, and we can hopefully get back to them. So the next slide is testing a strategic recommendation. And so this is something where you may have a document you've created and you want input from your AI engine about it. And so the weak version would be, does this strategic recommendation look good? Which is a question that, again, invites agreement. AI is inclined to say, oh, you're brilliant, great job. That's not what you're looking for. So the stronger prompt is inviting a specific skeptical role. And that might be an experienced, financially cautious board member who isn't easily impressed by consultant speak. And ask for exactly the things that role would you might expect to produce. Things like sharp objections, a perceived gap in the logic, or an assumption that they may not want to tell you about, but that would be useful for you to know. So please notice that the through line through both examples is the stronger version always names names in terms of who's asking, what they actually need, and what the deliverable should look like. That's the whole technique, but obviously, when you get into it, there's more nuance, etc., as you develop your skills. So, same question here. Anyone who has any experience with this kind of thing, and any questions or any experiences to share? Okay, well, if something comes up, please put it in the chat.
There's some, there's some discussion, David, about the practical, how do I access it? Which one should I access? What should I pay for? And maybe we can all discuss that together later in the presentation once
Yeah,
we get all the.
I don't pretend to have encyclopedic knowledge on that. I just know that Claude's working pretty well for me, but I'm sure there's other things that are working well for other people. Anything else at this point? Okay. So next slide, which should be 6 more techniques.
Yep, it's up, but
Okay. So there's 6 more techniques. These all fall into the same 3 buckets as before. There are just more ways to draft. more ways to summarize, or to think something through. And so I'll just go through them quickly in the interest of time. Let AI help you design the prompt before you use it. Give AI your actual words, not a summary, because it works best with data. And I would say not just your words, but any data you can provide that's not confidential, that's going to help AI to lead you in a better direction. We've started playing around with an environmental analysis approach where we take the Form 990, we take anything we can find from their website, their competitors, all that kind of thing, and it really enriches the product that comes out from AI. Ask for options before you edit, because if you're thinking of AI as a thought partner, then it can give you a number of different things to consider. Another thing that if you're early in AI, you will probably find yourself frustrated with what I call AI speak. It sounds like it's coming from where it's coming from, which is a machine. And I found that if I tell it to avoid that, it will improve. Another thing that improves it is to train it on what I sound like. Even if you just take a lot of things you may have written and load it into AI and say, this is what I sound like, this is how I approach things, that can produce a better product for you. And then another one, you may spend a lot of time developing a prompt that works great for you. Don't assume that your AI engine is going to save it. So if you have an AI prompt that you think you will find useful many times, I think what a lot of people now are loading it into Google Docs or some place where it's readily accessible, and you can go bring it back for what might be a new project. So I'm not going to teach those live, but I really encourage you to learn them by engagement, experimenting with them, seeing what works for you, and never be afraid to ask AI, what am I doing wrong? What could I do better? Teach me some practices to make me a better AI practitioner. Next slide, please. Okay, confidentiality. This is not my favorite subject, but it's something that we as consultants need to be really sensitive to, because there's information we receive that if we're not careful with it, we run the risk that somehow it will get into the memory of your AI engine and somehow slip out into the public domain. So when you're consulting, serving on a board with access to sensitive information, data security is not a footnote, it's a prerequisite. So you should see 3 boxes on the screen. The first is information that's safe to use. That's information you've already anonymized. For instance, you may have removed the name of the person you're interviewing, and your own frameworks are okay to use in there. Public available data is okay. Draft language you wrote yourself is okay. Next box is caution. That's naming individuals, not just the interviewee, but something they may be saying about someone else in the organization. Specific financial figures, information about internal organizational conflicts, anything shared with you in confidence. So when you get into this zone, it's really a matter of the consultant's discretion. And so what I think the best approach a lot of times is to screen a transcript before you consider putting it into AI and filter it. You can take something that somebody names the person they have a problem with. You can just say, well, I have a problem with someone in the organization about this. So you don't lose the essence of it, but it's not quite as proprietary or damaging if it gets out. And the third box is things you want to avoid entirely, and that would be raw interview transcripts with identifying details, client documents not meant for external audiences, and anything covered by confidentiality agreement. And again, I think I mentioned earlier, but I would really encourage you to be thoughtful about developing a protocol for how you handle information that's even potentially confidential, particularly if you have a team. That's something we're going through. So we're working on standardizing so everyone's approaching it the same way. And then another huge step, I probably should have started with this. Turn off the training function in your AI engine setting. The default setting in most AI engines is everything you put into it goes into its memory, and from there, control is completely lost. So turn that engine off, and that should help a lot. So in this regard, I would say the simplest test is if you wouldn't forward it to someone outside the engagement without thinking twice, don't paste it into AI without thinking twice either. Next slide, please.
It's just thank you. It's the final slide.
All right, well, thank you. Just a few things to end on. So I've tried to cover the practical side for you all here. Your handout has 10 techniques, 2 examples with hopefully parallels to processes you're going through, and then this confidentiality agreement. I hope you find that all useful. And so just brief summary. If you don't remember anything else, if you're new to AI, open a chat, say what you're trying to do, and treat the answer as a draft. It's the beginning of a discussion with AI. It's not like AI has all the answers, and then to follow up on what Michael said earlier. The final product, to the extent that it goes to a client, is your product. It's not AI's client product. So you need to be very careful. You need to know that AI sometimes hallucinates. AI sometimes is prideful enough that tries to sound smarter or more knowledgeable than it is. So it does make stuff up occasionally. I haven't run into that a lot, but I know it happens. So just own whatever product comes out of this that you're going to use with a client. So thank you. And I hope that the guide is useful for you, at least in terms of getting started. As you progress and evolve, you'll probably have your own, set of rules, practices, but hopefully that's a good start. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, David. I really appreciate it. That was very informative to get everybody at these adults with prompting and how to make things more effective. So the next piece of the agenda is we're going over 2 case studies. One I'll be presenting and the other one Amelia Winter will be presenting. The first one is just a stakeholder survey case study. What we did here was for an internal project, just to give you some background, they undertook an internal project to conduct a stakeholder survey of approximately 20 clients as part of the annual planning review. We used AI to basically consolidate the surveys that were done and so put them in by topic and then summarize them so they could be used to so they could be used to consolidate information to put together to present to the board for Joel handed that off. So the prompt we used was help me perform an analysis and create a summary by item of a client survey that was performed and documented into the file action plan analysis. So what I did was I fed it a file that was already pre-formatted. So I got out of it what I wanted it to look like and how it should summarize by category. So the action planning table came out as, financial advice, what the key sentiment is, what the priority was, and the recommended actions. And then additional output after the prompt was run, it's basically a summarization of all the question sets and what was done on that. And that's basically, this is a very simple example on how you can just use a simple prompt to create and aggregate data. Has anyone else ever tried that? I mean, how many people have used that? I know David gave an example for a single, but this is taking large amounts of surveys and consolidating. Carl, you're just an overachiever, buddy. So, but it's a good tool to be able to do that, right? So there's a lot of things you can do with this to consolidate data, just using a generative AI prompt to get that. Does anybody have any questions on what that was done, or anybody have any leaves this time to ask any questions up to this point? We've covered quite a bit. Okay, so I'm going to turn this over to Amelia, and we will get.
Thank you, Michael. When Linda first reached out to me and said, hey, can you share how you use AI to run the environmental scan on the project? My first instinct was, well, I don't have time to do this. And then I said, you know what, let's get AI to help me prepare for this presentation. And in here, you're going to see two prompts that I gave to Claude. The first prompt being, hey, can you just pull together a summary of what we did together and create a report for me? And also tell me what I should have done that I didn't do. So Claude turned out a Google document through its workspace integration. I looked at it, I was like, this looks really good. Now turn this into a slide deck. I gave it a bunch of guidelines on exactly what I wanted to see. And using a Gamma integration, Claude created a slide deck for me. My total time invested, probably about an hour, and most of it was spent just kind of reviewing the document and then finding screenshots from the environmental scan that I did that I could share as an example for you. I want to caveat here that I did not edit the slides that Claude created for this particular presentation because I wanted to show you a sense of raw output. So here is the screenshots from the actual presentation that I prepared for the City of Lauderdale Lakes. And in here, this is census data, beautiful charts, analysis of stakeholders, as well as a brief section about the data, where the sources came from. Next page, please. And on the next page, Michael, is where the presentation actually starts. So Claude turned a multi-sourced census data, other analysis from really meaningful sources of information into what was essentially a weekend project. Next page, please. Some guidelines on how to get started. If you're doing this, first, you want to choose your LLM. I use Claude for a variety of reasons. Its reasoning ability, its ability to write documentation, and its connection to other tools. So in this case, includes the Google Workspace tools as well as Gamma, which creates slides. Second, I have a paid account. I actually have an enterprise account to protect my client work, which I do beyond ESC. So that paid account provides data privacy for all of my clients. The third thing I did was set global instructions. This isn't just for this project, but across all of my Claude instances, I give it directions on sticking to facts, admitting uncertainty, citing your sources. I give it references of my writing style so that when it produces documents, it sounds a little bit more like me. Next, I create projects. I have projects for each of my clients. I have a project for my health records, a project for my family chief of staff, for family travel plans. All of them are in projects because what that does is it allows me to go back and find documents or one, like I did, create a summary of this particular project in a very simple way for this presentation. I uploaded a style guide. I told it the tone I liked, the formatting I liked, what kinds of colors to use, and I have it apply across all my tasks. The other thing I do is when I work on a project, I set some standing preferences. It might be an industry indication, it might be geographies, and I do that in the project memory so it stays in the instructions, and I don't have to keep repeating myself as I spend more time in the project. And last but not least, sometimes you just run out of chat space, right? Claude just runs out of energy and tokens trying to process a single chat. The one thing I do at the end of his chat is summarize what we got to so far, key ideas, key concepts, and I'll take that chat, the last chat, dump it into a new one and continue from there. So that's what I do to kind of keep the conversations fresh going across chats. Michael, next page, please. All right, so this is what we did and who did what. On the left-hand side are some of the deliverables that I put together for this particular project. On the right-hand side is what Claude did and what I did. And what we're going to do over the next 5 minutes or so is just briefly walk you through the various activities. I'm going to share highlights. I'm not going to walk through each one in detail, but I'll share highlights and some key takeaways that would help you the next time you try to do an environmental scan for your next ESC project. Next page. All right, all of these pages are organized in very much the same way. You're going to see the steps that were taken. You're going to see some best practices that I put in place, and then what else Claude would recommend. So, by all means, feel free to browse. You'll have all these slides at the end of it. I think the key takeaway in here is the first is Claude, or at least AI, will work with a variety of data formats. I tried to be good. I tried to download CSV files, but honestly, if you've ever worked with a government website, those things are like a pain to try to find exactly what you need. Sometimes the screenshots are easier. And in some cases, where screenshots were faster, I screenshot it, dumped it straight into Claude and said, turn this into a CSV file. And it did. So it took a variety of screenshots, took CSV files, took Excel files, and put it all into a single massive database that I could then run my analysis. The one thing I liked about Claude, and my Claude has been trained to push back, was it flagged that I was using a variety of data. I was using 1-year data and in some cases 5-year data. And there was just the mixing of data, which was like, hey, just so you know, you're doing this. And I was like, yes, I know I'm doing it, but there isn't anything else. So we're going to keep doing it. But thank you for telling me. And that's what I've loved about working with AI. At least Claude, the one that I've trained, has a tendency to say, did you know that you're doing this? And I'm like, yes, thank you, moving on. And I've always appreciated those conversations. Next slide, please. On this particular page, we then launched into the comparative analysis, right? Having downloaded all the CSV files, pulled it together, Claude built this master CSV across multiple geographies. And I was like, what are you seeing in here? Number one, I don't really trust AI, so whatever it's so I double checked. But the thing that I did that Claude didn't instinctively do was tell me the so what. It was like, oh, this is the number, that's the number, and that's the number. I was like, what do the numbers tell us? So I pushed the narrative. The other thing I noticed is that Claude is extremely diplomatic, at least mine is. And it was very polite. It couched everything in very neutral terms. And I told it, let's not be diplomatic here. That's for me to decide how I want to put in the final presentation. You give me the facts as it is. And I requested extremely direct language. And I think the one thing for us to keep in mind as we work with AI is we want to retain the judgment of the tone and the style. Let AI tell us the truth, right? The truth in their facts, in their narrative, and then we can decide what's the right approach to take with our clients. Next slide, please, Michael. On this particular page, Claude then embarked on report writing for me. And it developed an executive summary I based off the style guide that I uploaded. Even then, there were iterations required. And one of the guidances that I gave it was this audience is going to be, they're going to be board members. They're not going to have time to read in excruciating detail. Let's use bullet points. Let's make it, more of an informal report rather than an extremely formal draft. The other thing I told it to do was to separate what's backed up by data versus an inference. And that's going to be really important for credibility, our credibility with our clients, so that they know when it's fact-based and data-based versus, and therefore, this is the potential application, this is the inference coming out the data. And that was actually one of the things that I gave guidance to Claude, and Claude reflected that in the executive summary. Next page, please. The next thing Claude did for me was pull together a SWOT. So we had a SWOT from the board members as well as members from the executive team, and we pulled that all together. The first thing Claude and I actually did together was to start to segment the data, right? It's this big pile of survey questions, and if you throw it all in, what comes out could be a jumbled mess. So the first thing Claude and I worked through together was, okay, let's start to bucket this thing, right? Let's turn this into a methodology. After we bucket it, then you can evaluate it and then you can map it to observations. So this was a very iterative process of Claude kind of doing a first pass through the data, me looking at it, trying to decide where to bucket and how to change things. One of the things that I called out explicitly for AI was, don't hide the contradictions. And I know you've heard one of our other presenters say that, right? You want to frame the contradictions as valuable. Don't soften them, don't hide them. This is the way to call it out. And then once again, it's our role as the consultant to make a decision on how we want to frame it and use it. Next slide, please. Finally, with all of the data out there, I was like, Claude, now it's time to turn this into a slide deck. And one of the reasons I use Claude, right now Claude has its own ability to create slides. Back when I did this project, not so much. So I had an integration between Claude and a tool called Gamma. Gamma has the ability to create slides, and I created guidelines for Claude. Use this theme in this format. I want minimal text, large headlines. The audience is not gonna read this, right? Not gonna read this word by word. So please make sure the key message pops, right? The numbers have to show up very prominently on the slides. Another presenter also said this, let Claude ask you questions before generating. And the process of answering Claude's questions helped me realize that I wasn't always as clear as I wanted to be. And when Claude asked the questions, we were able to fine tune and save an entire rebuild cycle and get it more correct right from the start. Next slide, please. I've got 2 steps on this page, one on research and source verification, and then continuity. The first thing around research and source verification is that you have to assume that your AI intern, super bright, super fast, also can be very wrong, not just from a hallucination perspective, but just, it's just not getting the right things. And I'll give you a very specific example. Prior to Lauderdale Lakes, I was doing some research via AI on the city of Hollywood, which is in Fort Lauderdale. And I was trying to pull data on competitors and how the Chamber of Commerce at Hollywood was structured. Well, the first thing AI did was assume that Hollywood was Hollywood, California, right? So I had to go through and clear out the wrong sources and say, no, not California, Hollywood, Florida, and be able to verify that before I was confident in using the data. So always check. Don't assume it's accurate. Assume it's a bright, overeager intern that always doesn't have full context. And it's our job as consultants to have the context and to bring it to the table. Last but not least is the continuity. Sometimes chats just kind of run out of steam. And what I have done across chat sessions is at the very end of the chat, when I sense it's just kind of running out, I was like, can you summarize everything we've done so far in a chat that I can take and paste into the next conversation? And Claude would just kind of create a summary document, copy, paste, start over, and be able to continue from there. And that is what allows me to maintain the continuity across sessions. Last page, please. So finally, 5 key takeaways for all of us here as consultants. The first thing, and this is thing I've told my children, this is what I tell everybody, we need to know what truth and quality look like, right? We are not outsourcing our judgment. We're not outsourcing our taste. We're outsourcing the labor, right? So Claude did the heavy lifting of consolidating the databases. It did the first pass analysis. It pulled the slides together based off the analysis. But the judgment on how we're going to bucket was mine. The judgment on let's push back, let's go blunt, let's just tell the truth, that was my decision to make. What choices, how to phrase, what style of writing to use, what colors to use, taste, that was all of mine. So in the end, we're responsible for truth and quality, and that is still always our job. The second key point is you want to start to operationalize for repeatable outcomes, right? Things like project structure, writing styles, the connections between your AI tools. It seems like a bit of a hassle when you get started. You're like, well, it's just one chat. You don't know if that one chat's going to become many. You don't know if that one chat's going to be the start of multiple things. So think about, invest some time into how you're going to structure your projects, how you want to put the key pieces, the key foundational pieces in place so that you can repeat consistently. Third thing, set your boundaries for AI, right? Write intern, super fast, not always highly accurate. So what I do with Claude is I tell it from the start, I want high quality data sources. I want you to tell me when you don't know. It's okay to say you don't know. It's okay to ask questions. Always separate data from inferences. Ask questions before starting. These are standard rules that I put in instructions, and Claude always behaves this way with me now. It will tell me when it's not sure. It will ask questions when it doesn't know. And it will confess when it's implying a lead too far. Fourth point, everyone has said this, and I will say it again, do not trust, always verify. One of the things I've enjoyed is when I run something on AI, I was like, create a report, then I'll take it out of Claude, I'll dump it into Gemini, I'll say, fact check everything. And then it will come back to me and say, all right, this is absolutely true, and we're verified against these sources. This one, Claude kind of assumed too much, so just so you know. And I've done this across multiple AIs to get them to check each other. Last but not least, half the fun is debating with AI. And when you're prompting it correctly, other presenters have also mentioned, is an absolutely amazing thought partner. It will, when you ask it to challenge you, it will take you into places that will make you think. And that's all for my presentation for today. Back to you, Michael.
Thanks, Savia. That was awesome. So now we're back to, or we've come to the QA and wrap up. We've seen a lot of things have been mentioned about, quality of the data, making sure that, you're using a tool that's not going to give the client data out to the world. Those guardrails as they're referred to. So does anybody have any questions, concerns, good party jokes, anything of the above? Just to try to close this up.
Sure.
I have a couple of questions, please.
Sure, Stephen, you're up.
Yeah,
The floor.
Amelia, you talked about using several different AI tools, Claude, Gemini, etc. What's the cost factor in doing all of that? Is it minimal? Is it significant?
It does vary by tool. I get Gemini as part of my Google Workspace account for the company that I own. So that's nice. I pay for an enterprise version of Claude, $1,500 a year for 5 accounts, which I then distribute to my colleagues and sometimes my family members. The other tools tend to land in at about between $120 to $200 a year. So not high. I think the bigger question for all of us is to always be able to go back and evaluate our tool set. For example, I bought Gamma, but that was before Claude started to develop skills in slide building. And now that Claude has some fairly decent slide building skills, I may decide to discontinue Gamma. So just be aware, things are changing so very quickly, and you'll always evaluate what's on your stack.
Right. Thank you. Second question for Joel and others here who sell. Are you finding that clients are pushing back on pricing because they assume that a lot of the work is being generated quickly via AI?
Yeah, you have to go to a fixed price. You got to get away from all this hourly stuff.
But even at fixed price, they're doing the numbers in their head saying, wait a minute, they're asking for 15,000. I know XYZ is going to be, AI generated and, it's not worth it.
What I look at is it's not just fixed price, it's value price. How
Okay.
much is it? And the same thing for two different customers could be very different, depending on how much they value it. It makes it not simple calculation, but that's one way of doing it is value pricing.
Our pricing has always been value pricing. We are inexpensive for what we do, thanks to all of our consultants, because you provide the labor of the consultant through your in-kind contributions. So our pricing is, I don't think, I certainly haven't had a client approach me about introducing, well, are you using AI instead of consultants? Really, we've been using AI to augment and enhance the work that our consultants are using. The other thing I wanted to just mention, I put it in the chat earlier, is if you're using AI for any personal, organizational, or client-related work, you have to use a paid subscription. Don't use the free versions of ChatGPT or Gemini or whatnot. Otherwise, whatever queries or prompts you put in and the information becomes part of the overall knowledge base, and so the whole confidentiality stuff is like totally out out the door. So just wanted to mention that. Looks like Susan has her hand raised.
Yeah, I'm curious about people's opinions about the ethics of informing your client how and if you are using AI. Amelia, I'd be curious what you would say about that particularly.
Like on my slides today, you've noticed at the bottom of it all had Notebook LM produced.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you, Carl.
Oh, my turned off? Okay.
No.
I was saying, I make, I'm very transparent about it on all of my slides. If you notice over in the bottom left-hand corner, it said Notebook LM, and it produced them.
Yeah, Susan, I think it should go into our scope statement. It should go into our final report.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Question here. So, David Palmquist here.
Go ahead,
Okay.
David.
Yeah, go
Yeah.
ahead, David.
So, the ability of AI to manage to go through all this data really depends on if the data is accessible and machine readable. So, David Blanco mentioned briefly 990s. So, in my work life, I had to oversee 1,300 nonprofits and constantly reading 990s, and I found them on GuideStar. And as I recall, that was a non-searchable PDF. How do you get it today? How can you get a 990 and analyze it?
So you can load it in there and it'll analyze. It can get to the PDF stuff, even though you can't.
Well, you can print
do you
it.
get
You
it
can
from-
print. You can print a 990 and load it in that way too.
Yeah.
You can scan it. You get it from GuideStar or somewhere else?
I forget.
GuideStar's where I've always got it from.
There's a number of
I can't
online
remember the different kinds of ways you can export it. But
Yeah, the Charity Navigator might have it as well.
yeah.
It's worth noting that the federal government currently is cutting way back on data.
yeah,
So that's another issue we have. If you don't have the data, you can't do the analysis.
exactly.
Okay.
We've got
Somebody
some
asked
very
about the,
interesting comments in the chat if you guys want to take a quick look, or I can facilitate. What do you see, Carl?
Somebody asked about the tokens and thought that they weren't using it. You just haven't reached that limit yet. If you do very much image stuff, you'll be in those limits really quick. Just this past week I was trying to do something and it goes like, well, you're out of those, but I'm gonna refresh it in 10 hours. So just go away, do something else, and then you'll have your tokens back. So you do it, all of these things, it does use tokens, but a lot of things you think it's a lot of tokens, but it's not. You can run very large documents. I put whole books in that wind up not using very many tokens, but then you start fiddling around with very many images or YouTube movies and that kind of stuff. You'll eat up tokens pretty quick. And that's another thing you can input, by the way. If you take part of the stuff in Gemini, and I think it's also in Claude, instead of doing that whole file and stuff, you can give it to URL and let it go do it. Let it go pull the information.
I really like Amelia's tip about carrying forward a summary from before, and you can ask AI to prepare the summary for you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was a good tip I got today as well.
Good. I hope that everybody walks away with at least one tip. We do have some ESC affiliate leaders on the call. And there's some discussion about what is disclosed to clients, what is put in the business development documents and the proposals or the contracts. I know some of the affiliates have been very proactive about setting up some AI specific policies for internal and external audiences. Does anybody, any of those executive directors, leaders want to speak? Because it's not really up to the individual consultant necessarily to figure this out. But do any of the leaders want to speak?
Yeah, we should be doing that. We should add that to our employee handbooks and stuff. As some policy, just like we have policies around using data and all, we should have policies around this. And maybe that's something we could have people, submit their versions, and we could talk about that in another session.
Well, I'll just jump in at ESC Southern California. We created a policy actually, and it'll be one for staff and then guidelines and guardrails for consultants as well. I think things are moving quickly in some ways, and we're learning more and more. And I feel like I keep updating the policy for this, but so much of it is guide rails.
Right.
There's a policy, but we want people to feel supported and guided rather than I guess punitive, if you will.
Constrained.
And constrained, definitely. And then I know internally we are going to be doing training for staff, at least to bring staff up to use it to a baseline where we're all at a baseline for using AI, and identifying specific ways and specific things that we can do with AI rather than just doing sort of broad strokes on this is how you use AI. It's getting really specific and looking at some specific ways where we think that AI can be useful and diving into those processes as
And
well.
that's changing almost monthly now. Just like she was saying a while ago, she used Gamma because Claude didn't have it, but now Claude and Gemini all have that kind of thing. So it's going to be an evergreen process with these guidelines and policies that we really have to stay on top of.
I mean, for the
I'm
next
happy to
session,
share what we have.
sorry.
I'm happy to share what we have. It's not finalized, but I'm happy to share it.
And don't you have some language, Erin, also with your contracts about, some language that says, and as part of our work, we may be using AI? Right, Julia?
Go,
Want me to
Julia.
jump in, Erin?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're putting it in, and as everyone said, everything's changing. David Blanco, thank you, David. That was awesome. All the presenters, thank you. And Sue, and yeah, that was just great, Linda. So we're gonna have something in there now. We always do a match meeting at the beginning, as sort of a kickoff with the client, and it will also be covered by the relationship manager in the kickoff meeting. I mean, in the match meeting. But what David and his team are doing are really going to influence a lot about how we talk about it and what we say, because they're learning so much about what they're going to recommend as sort of our best use of it with our clients. So we're sort of doing it, but it's iterative as we go.
Yeah, because I have mixed motion about how much we tell them, because I don't say, hey, I'm using Excel and I've got this database in which one, SQL. I don't go into all of that kind of stuff of how we got the data and where we got it from. And we have this huge database and it's in this kind of a format and this kind of a language. We don't go into all of that stuff with other tools. So I kind of have mixed emotion. I like being transparent, but at the same time, it's not really any of your business. Did you get what you asked for?
Well, arguably, it exposes them to some risk that they wouldn't be associated that they wouldn't be exposed to in those other tools, even if you're very careful with the data. So I mean, I'm not a consultant who's always looking for more rules, but I think it's wise to have at least a sentence in there saying we're using it and you should be aware of it, and the final product will be ours, not the AI engines.
You know, we're coming up at the top of the hour and we want to respect everybody's time, although I could keep talking. There's still, it's a good topic when there's still like more questions than answers. And we're going to have a second peer education series in October, and the plan is to have it on AI also, a different theme. But I think what I'll do is maybe share like a survey with you guys and allow you to provide some feedback about what you found most helpful or what you'd like to see going forward. I mean, this is a lot like, Carl is like, by the time I speak in October, I'll have a lot of new things to say. I mean, that's what's happening. And I think for the leaders, the affiliate leaders, there's a lot of interesting discussion about what guardrails that you're putting up for the consultants. What are you sharing as part of your business development? What are you making sort of recommended versus mandatory? So lots of things to talk about. Thank you so much to our moderator, Michael, and our speakers. Thank you so much. And for all of you attending, I wanted to get at least 60 people registered, and we did it. So I can go celebrate now. But thank you all so much.
Your
And
marketing material worked. You did good.
thank you all for your service, of course, and for the work you do in supporting the ESC mission.
And thank you for putting this together. It was great.
Sure.
Thanks, Linda.
Bye.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.